He found that there were some Russians on the plane, and then he said this had to be Russian spy. And he went into this, computer chamber under the first class. Like, he went in there, he connected his laptop to the computer. He altered the routes of the plane and switched off the radar. Only thing was missing was Tom Cruise. Hello everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel. In this video, I'm going to talk about the bizarre new Netflix documentary about the flight MH370, which crashed in 2014 on March 8th. So it's basically the anniversary. I'm just going to go over the actual documentary in case you're not sure whether to watch it. If you watched it, let me know what you thought about it. So comment below for your opinions, because this has to spark some discussion. As we know, they made a documentary about Boeing 737 MAX. And now they come with a documentary about the flight that disappeared, which is Malaysian Airlines Flight MH370. So basically, it starts, the first part is kind of okay. The flight crashed shortly after midnight. What happened was it just disappeared from the radar, right? They thought it crashed where it disappeared. But then we conclude that actually the flight turned off all the equipment in terms of the being able to be visible, and then made a U-turn back to Malaysia and then headed towards Indian Ocean. Nothing makes sense, I know. So basically there were theories, not only in the Netflix documentary, but when this event occurred, there were theories concluding aliens, military base landings, so the plane just landed at the military base for some reason, hijacking by Russians, of course, sabotage by the captain for no reason, actually there was like political reason, which is no reason, crashing into the ocean, meteorite, that's like, wow, okay, so it couldn't get any weirder. But of course, when you're searching for answers, you are trying to consider every kind of answer basically and solution to this problem, because it's unsolved, which is unheard of. Like, you cannot even find the debris, which was found in the end. But let's go step by step. The first theory, the biggest one, the strongest theory, was that the captain Zachary Ahmad Shah took control of the plane and crashed it into the Indian Ocean after flying for 6 hours to run out of fuel, and then he crashed it. Like, where is the sense? Like, this theory makes absolutely no sense. Like, if you want to hijack a plane to crash it, you want to sabotage it, you freaking put the nose down. He was already above the ocean. So, like, why do you fly back for 6 hours to wait until you ran out of fuel and then you crash it? Like, what? The last communication from the pilot was the sentence that he said to the air traffic controller, and he said good night, and 5 minutes after, the plane disappeared from the radar. There was a military satellite confirmed that the plane took U-turn, headed back, and then towards Indian Ocean, where it disappeared again. Families claim, there was one member of the family, and he claimed that he received a phone call like from his dad, or there was like the other passenger, and they were not quick enough to pick it up. Nothing happened, so they called back, and the phone was ringing, but nobody was picking up. And other passengers claimed as well that they tried to call their relatives and it was actually ringing, right? So even after like 6 hours or whatever. So they actually thought like the plane is just cruising, or it landed, was hijacked and it landed. Absolutely understandable, like believing that your loved ones are still alive, The only thing about this particular family member was that everything that he said, it seemed like he's reading it off the script. And I know some people are nervous in front of the camera, but when you're doing a documentary and you're actually reading something, you better like not to be there in the first place, because that looks absolutely nothing close to authentic. So, that was really strange. I was just like, I don't really believe that when you read it. The American journalist, which was complete amateur internet guru, I think his name was Jeff Weiss, came into the picture, okay? And he took over basically the whole Netflix documentary. So his first theory was that, from the internet sources and stuff like that, that the pilot was actually evil and he crashed it to make a political statement. Just like making a faulty Boeing Max, right? And the first thing that Americans did was to blame the pilots. So Boeing was actually perfectly fine aircraft and pilots were, not skilled enough to fly it and they crashed it. This amateur journalist theory was that the pilot decided to tell the other pilot, like, oh, can you grab me something? He locked the door on the cockpit. And then with one button, so he switched the button off and all the communication from the aircraft went silent. So basically, with one switch in the cockpit, you can make yourself invisible to any radar, which is like, I'm no aviation expert, but this is just ridiculous nonsense to anybody having a common sense. You cannot have this kind of switch available to the pilot, like, excuse me. And of course, later in the documentary, this was proven right. My theory was proven right, that this is not true. And the switch is actually, and I have to double check that because I don't even believe that, but comment below if you know the truth, that the actual switch is outside of the cockpit, like below the first class. So you can access that. And he said, like, it's unlocked. You can access that and you can access all the computers, all the data. And this later, what he said, another theory just broke me in pieces. So another theory was that Malaysian Airlines, it was a scam, insurance scam to get the money. Malaysian Airlines claimed that their competitors are trying to destroy them because 5 months after MH370, there was another Malaysian airplane, which was also Boeing 777, and it was shot down by Russian separatists and also Ukrainian separatists. They flew off course, which was also weird, and that's why they flew over the war zone, but they were like basically off course, which the separatists, they thought like this is not commercial because the commercial planes fly there every day, multiple times a day, but they go a different route. So this was very suspicious to them and they shot it because they were in the war zone. There's no excuse, by the way. But obviously, this American journalist, Jeff Weiss, immediately, like in the documentary, he says, this flight was shot by Russians. Okay, if you're trying to create some kind of propaganda, go ahead, but just bring the facts. Like, nobody currently likes Russians, I get it. But this was shot down by Russian and Ukrainian separatists, okay? So if you're trying to pretend you're a documentary and then you have this clown on and he says, this plane was shot by Russians, that's it. I'm like, okay. So he started this theory that basically the bottom line was everybody is Russian spy. So he's another theory when actually he found out, because he Googled and he looked at YouTube videos, that the switch of the aircraft to be invisible is actually not in the cockpit. So then he thought, oh my God, I completely ruined the reputation of the pilot, including ruined their families, because everybody was blaming them and it was horrible. So he ruined their lives, basically, for a moment at least. And then he moved on to everybody else. So he started ruining other victims' families, right? By blaming now one passengers. And he said, oh my God, these were like 1 or 3 Russians. And I had to like skip through this because I was just like, okay, this is getting ridiculous. He found that there were some Russians on the plane. And then he said, this had to be Russian spy. And he went into this, data computer chamber under the first class. Like he went in there, he connected his laptop to the computer, he altered the route of the plane and switched off the radar, and then he like altered. Only thing was missing was Tom Cruise, right? Like this was literally Mission Impossible like agenda. And I'm just like, really, like how, like what am I watching? So that documentary from me went from like kind of decent to a complete rubbish crap, which I'm pretty sure, you know, a lot of people will agree with me. So his theory was that these Russian spies hijacked the plane. He never mentioned how they got into the cockpit, but okay. Like, they took the plane, they altered the route, and then they hijacked it and landed in Kazakhstan. And then what? That was his theory ended right here. And I'm just like, okay. And then the best part of this was actually that after a year, some guy found a debris and on the beach, like a part of the Boeing 777. And you know, the families were very skeptical. It was like, oh, the government planted the debris there. Like, how can you find it after a year randomly, you know? So they didn't really believe it. Fair enough to them. But this journalist, the American journalist Jeff Weiss, he said, I searched the guy who found debris. And he's actually a Russian spy. And this was getting, like, at this point, I was just like, okay, this is like too much. Like, this is too much now. Like, it turned into like this ridiculous, I don't even know how to describe it. Like, when he was just like, okay, he's another Russian spy, and I found that he was actually in the Soviet Union back in the 80s when the Soviet Union collapsed. Now that makes him a Russian spy, and he found the debris because he planted it there because Russian government told him to do it. And they shot down the plane. No, they hijacked this plane in March 2014 when they invaded Ukraine. Like, you can find a lot of connections, right? But like, you can always find a lot of connections if you want to. So I'm not saying like I believe this or I don't believe this, but this documentary was just turning into like the most ridiculous thing I've ever watched, at least this year. The final conclusion, unfortunately, was obviously the officials said that they cannot conclude anything. So they have no idea why the plane changed the course, and they have no idea, they have no evidence, basically. So they found like a little debris here and there, but that was it. Families thought it's planted, and that's pretty much like the end of the documentary, which to me, it just seemed like Americans, oh yeah, they also blamed China for so they blamed Russia, right? And then they started blaming China because China had interest in all this. And I'm just like, okay, so, okay. I was really looking forward to this, and I cannot say like it disappointed, because what else can you expect from Netflix? But this was actually turning into like comedy, but also I found it kind of like disrespectful with all the conspiracy theories. I found it a little disrespectful to the families, but anyway, they were part of the documentary. I mean, everybody got paid pretty well for that. So let me know what you think about it in the comments. Let me know if you liked it. Let me know if you found it ridiculous as well. And let me know what you actually think happened to MH370. And don't forget to subscribe.